work, mate. Nice job. Nice job. Okay. On the grid. 200. Crest and dip into causeway. 100. Crest and dip into causeway.
Well, you would be forgiven to think that that was a scene from a South African rally. It is a South African built car, but it's certainly not South Africa. But it is a unique opportunity for us to pay a visit to a man that started his rallying in South Africa. But first of all, good evening to Clint Lingeveld, my co-host.
Good evening, Patrick, and good evening to the audience. I've got hoendervlees, like they say, after watching that video.
It's a unique opportunity tonight. We said good evening to each other, but we're actually going to say good morning to our guest this time.
No, for sure. So, no, definitely, it's a true sign of dedication as a rallyist to wake up 3 o'clock in the morning to talk to the two of us. But yeah, watching that video, I thought I'm back in Malmesbury, my hometown. So, welcome this evening, Marius, and thank you.
Yeah, I can only think that is the sort of clip that would be used following my reputation in South Africa with a few of those things that has happened. I don't know why always that is the type of thing that a journal should use.
Marius, it's unfortunate, but the things they remember is you can do 1,000 things right, but do one thing wrong, everybody remembers.
Yeah, that's for sure. And it lives with you for the rest of your life.
Well, so let's start off there. What made you famous in South Africa on TV?
Well, there's probably two things. The one was when my good old friend Jan Hatze was standing on the wall in Kalani and struck the wall, and Jan and camera and all fell off the wall. And then my famous thing with, what was it? I can't even remember what the program was called, but when we rolled the Subaru on a TV program that we made 3 days before leaving for Cape Town for our national, for first national with it, I think.
Did the cars survive both scenes, or
Yes.
Or was that? That's all that counts.
That one was quite interesting because we shot the whole program, and it started fairly early in the morning, and you know we kept on going, and eventually at about 3 o'clock or whatever they said, look, it's fine, we've got everything that we need, we can go home now. And we had the car already on the trailer, and the producer called and said he'd like to just grab a few more shots of us around the track. Can we just come out once more? And we took the car off the trailer. Jan got in with me, Jan signed, and we did one more sort of lap for them, and it was just a very slow roll of the car. We came around that corner that we'd done 10, 15 times that day, and it went sideways a bit, and it grabbed and shot into the inside left wheel, clipped the bank, and it just rolled us. Very, very nice, gentle roll. You know, although that wasn't the way the producer made it out. I was obviously gutted, so I went back and I said to them, you can use anything and everything but that footage. And they agreed. And then obviously when all of the trailers came out for this program, all that they showed every time was a roll. And I'll look, one of the things that I'll never forget is Alvin Brain sitting next to me and screaming like a pig when we went out that first time around the track. That was the program's name, Bang Yang Doye Yang, I think, if I remember correctly.
Well, you certainly took it to extremes there. Marius, there's a lot of South Africans that will know exactly who we're speaking to now, but this is an international medium now. So please introduce Marius Swart to us. What is your background? Where do you come from? Where were you born? And Well, take us to the early days of your motorsport career.
Yeah, well, I was born in a little hospital right on the border between South Africa and Botswana, close to where Sun City is. My dad was in the police, so moved around a lot and happened to be in a little town called Ganscale at that stage. And when I was born, it was in this little place called Derdepoort. Actually went back there with the Honda on a farm at one stage and went and had a look at where it was. Then, yeah, as I said, Dad was a policeman, and with the background, we traveled a lot. I was not involved in motorsport ever in my life. I never grew up in it, never knew about it, and got involved in it by buying the ex-Niels Vermaak Spotty Woodhead little Alpha that they used for tarmac regularity rally. And I just joined the Alpha Club because I've always loved Alphas. And the guys asked me, what do you do with this car? And I said, no, I go shopping with it. It's a beautiful car to drive. I just enjoy the car. And they said, look, a car with a history like that, you can't. You've got to come and do these regularity rallies with us. I said, yeah, but, I don't have a clue about rallying or regularity rallying. And they said, well, approach Spotty Woodhead, Brian Woodhead, because he used to co-drive for Niels in this car, and they've won a few events, and surely he'd be interested. And I got his number from somebody and contacted him. And you know what Spotty is like, as long as there's no costs involved, I'll do it. And it just happened to be that I think a week later, the tarmac rally up in Centurion was on, and I introduced to go there, or arranged to go there and meet him and introduce myself, because I thought there's no way I can get this man in the car with me without knowing him. And I went up to Centurion, and it was all just rally cars and whatever, and old spots with these golf, and I was just very impressed. I'd spectated on events previously when the Audis were going. That was actually my first introduction to rallying. And anyway, so you know what it's like. I sat in the car and smelled all of the fuel, and eventually I said to Spotty, if there's ever an event going, and because he said he battles to find navigators, I said, if there's ever a drive going, just give us a call. And lo and behold, I think this was the Saturday. The Tuesday I was walking on my site because I did a bit of property developing in South Africa, and my phone rang, and it was Spotty, and he said, this is Woodhead here. There's a ride going this weekend in the International Rally up in Witzenberg, if you're interested. Gee, and I said, well, Spotty, what do I need? And he said, well, I called him Mr. Woodhead at that stage. I said, Mr. Woodhead, what do I need? He said, well, you need a helmet, a race suit, and a license. I said, I've got the helmet, I've got the race suit, but I don't have the license. Fortunately, MSA was 5 k's down the road from me because I lived in Kailami at that stage, and the next morning I had my license. It was, we met the Thursday at the Ben Skuman. He came along. I waited for him, and my wife dropped me off, and the first thing I saw was my name on the car. It had Woodhead and Swart, and that to me was just incredible. I couldn't believe that my name's on a rally car. And you knew how Spotty did it. He A-framed the rally car behind his Golf. And I think Kevin Clark was servicing for us, and he had the Golf with a little horse float behind. And this was at about 5 o'clock Thursday, and we were driving up to Witzenberg. And sort of as we got in the car and said hi and whatever, he handed me a big A4 folder and switched on the light inside the car, and he said, well, that's the supplementary Rex for the rally, and there's the legends for the pace number. I've never in my life seen anything like this. I didn't know what I was in for. I didn't know what it was about. I started reading up about all of this, and He said afterwards to me, he said, when we got up there, and by that time I'd been reading all the way, and I hadn't been sick, he thought, maybe this could work. So we arrived at about, I can't remember, 11, 12 o'clock that night, and stayed with friends of his. He always had friends all over the place that we stayed at. And next morning, went for scrutineering, came back, and we were having breakfast. And as I said, to me, it was amazing. I was rubbing shoulders there suddenly with people that I've only heard and seen of in my life, the Dempstos and those people of the world. So we did the scrutineering. I just tagged behind Spotty like a little dog because I didn't have a clue what was going on. And we were sitting having breakfast, and I heard the rally cars going. Spotty is quite relaxed, finishing his breakfast, dressed in his normal blue shirt and his little Castrol, whatever the thing was called, and his dress shoes and his black long pants. I had, at that stage, I had my suit on, I just ready to go rallying. And eventually he looked at his watch and he said, I think we should go. And off we went, and we got to Park Vermeer, and our car was the only one left there. He was in a massive panic, got in the car and rushed into Louis Trichardt, because it was that town stage that we started with. And they changed the starting time, because it was only a town stage, from 2 minutes to 1 minute in between cars, and it was on the notice board, and he never checked that. Sorry, I had to see Kev coming there. Anyway, so off we rush, and I mean, it's just cars and people. When we get there, there's probably about 6 or 7 or 8 rally cars lined up ahead of us, and Spotty drives past all of them, pushes in right up front, and out he goes to the marshals. And I just see him flinging his arms and talking. And the last thing I remember him saying, well, I don't care, we can sort this out later, I'm leaving now. And he presses his finger on the desk for the staff marshal. He runs back to the car, puts the helmet and the gloves on. I've got my helmet on, and off we go. I've never done a rally in my life. I've never been on the stage. I didn't know what was waiting, and I had the pace notes in front of me. At least I had the pace notes. And the start lights went from red to orange to green, and I just started reading. And it was a 600-meter long piece of road before the first turn, and I just went 600, slow left, 200, medium right, and by the time we got to the 600, I'd finished the pace notes for the whole stage. And Spotty just said to me, don't worry, I know the stage, we'll talk about this later. And he wrote the rest of the stage, and we finished it off. We got to the end of that, and then I had to follow the road book, got to the start of the first stage, and whilst I was waiting for him there, he went quickly into the bushes and dressed and came back, and then he coached me on how to read notes for him. And by sort of the first 3-4 kilometers, after enjoying the sliding around and things on dirt, I then understood how the notes worked. And that was my introduction to rallying.
And I presume you didn't have a bad finish in the event either. The result wasn't too bad afterwards.
Can you believe it? We finished up 9th outright on an Africa Championship rally, and I know that there was one stage where we were something, because Spotty knew the stage apparently like the back of his hand. I think we were 5th or 6th fastest outright.
Well, of course, afterwards you could say it's only because you had such a magnificent new navigator.
Yeah, that's right. Look, obviously that was it. I was hooked. I then made an agreement with him that I would do the whole national season for him. It quickly turned out that eventually I bought a trailer. I then started trailering his car. He didn't have to A-frame it anymore, which he really enjoyed. And I had 2 of the probably the best years of learning or being introduced to rallying with the background and the experience that Spotty had. It was valuable. invaluable. I mean, honestly, as we all know, Spotty had probably very close to a photographic memory, because you do a stage and he had a little black book under his seat, and he'd lift the seat and get the black book out. And at the end of the stage, he'd look at the stage times and say, "No, not too bad. I think in 1994 I did this." And take the black book out, check it. No, it was actually same time or second quicker than that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, there's stories that I can tell about Spotty. It's incredible. But that then although what happened between him and myself then is that year we continued doing the regularity rallying as well as the first year, as well as the national championship. So sometimes we had to leave early at the national championship soon after finish on Saturday night, because we had a regularity rally the next day. And him and I actually did fantastically well with that. We won a number of events outright in the Alpha, and including the famous Victoria Polana thing. And we actually won you can call it the South African Regularity Rally Championship that next year.
With you driving or him navigating?
I'm driving and he's navigating. I mean, his navigating skills in regularity rallying was just
He's a
incredible.
human calculator.
We had one of those old. The one that we had in my car was a Walter, looked like a typewriter thing. It had a sort of an hinged bench, and it would sit on his seat. And I think people called them facets as well, but the one that we had was a Walter. It was the one that Spotty and Niels used. And as I said, it looked like a typewriter. You pulled things down and swung a sort of a little lever. But then on his left hand, he had his programmable HP20, and he would work both that one and the HP20 and read the two Odos. And
Sure.
I can remember going through speed there was a very famous sort of area on Polana in Nelspruit called the Boulders, where they would set you very tight speeds through this thing, and it was really a tight and twisty thing like this. And I would remember going through there and Spotty giving me an update every 200 to 300 meters where we were, because we were allowed to be 3 seconds early, but never late when we get to a control. So they'd have hidden controls anywhere, and then some places you had to stop at a control and give your time. And he would just swing this thing and say to me, 2 seconds late, 1 second early, 2 seconds early, every 200 meters. He was just incredible. And that whole Polana one was 800 and whatever, 870 Ks, and we had total penalty, everything included on that rally, of 67 seconds, which means driving accurate 2-speed, 2-time for 850 or 70 Ks at less than a second a kilometer out on that. And Spotty was just crazy. I mean, there was just nobody that could do that sort of thing.
Something you might, if I may interrupt, we've got Kevin Clark online. He says, "Hi, Marius. Yes, remember servicing for you and Spotty in the Gulf for many seasons. Glad to see you are still rallying in Brisbane. Regards, Kevin."
Yeah, that's nice to hear. I see Kevin still in the official bin. I see he's always marshalling and always still busy. I remember him as a scrutineer, and then obviously very fondly as service crew for me and Spots. Yeah, it's great memories coming back.
Well, I have to rub this one in, Clint. The man got 10 points on my side because he got Niels Vermaak's Alpha. He's got what a great start in the sport. To start off with an Alfa Romeo.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually through a friend of mine by the name of Swart. Now, Koert used to service for Niels and Spotty in the years when they really rallied. I think it was about 72 or something with the little Julia, and then Niels, obviously built that little Julia GT Junior that him and Spot used with all of the years of his rallying experience that went into it. I just bought it because I loved Alphas. And through that, I also got introduced to Sampi Bosman because he helped me sort out a bit of the suspension issues on my Julia, which I built as a stage car, which was my very first car I ever built and rallied on stages. But then, I don't know how many people know this, but Sampi Bosman was just an incredible technician and engineer. He actually designed and built the 3-liter V6 Alpha motor in South Africa. The engineers from Italy flew out and come and had a look at the engine and tested it, and after that approved it as a full Alfa Romeo factory engine to be used in the cars. Because before that, all of the V6 Alphas were 2.6 liters, and Sampi Bosman was the man who did the 3-liter conversion on it, and so good that it became an officially recognized Alpha.
Yeah, the era of Nicola Bianco and Glenwood Motors with Abel de Oliveira. It was a unique era of Group 1 racing in South Africa, indeed. It was fantastic. I can still hear those cars today. If I close my eyes, I still hear them. Very controversial at times, but it was a fantastic series. And to see Serge in the XR8 and John Gibb was in the other one, the Presto Parcels car. Serge was in the official Ford car. And of course, Tony Viana in a variety of BMWs. It was an amazing series. But it's incredible to hear you starting off in the sport and coming into contact with these people that you do not associate with rallying as such. Sampi was brilliant on the track, but you rarely heard of him being involved in rallying of any kind.
Yeah, it is. But then, as I said, Kurt took me to Sampi as well, and the reason for that was, we tried to build this brilliant 1600 Alpha motor with long strokes and whatever, and it didn't work. So Kurt took me to Sampi, and then when I spoke to Sampi was very much involved in those 1970, 72 years with rallying. He did a lot of work for Diff. What was his name?
David de Villiers.
No, Piazza Musso.
Giovanni Piazza Musso.
Giovanni, yes. So he did a lot of work for him as well on his rally car. So Sampi was excellent as far as suspension and things were concerned. I'll never forget when I took my Julia to him for the first time, he tried jacking it up at the back, and I think he jacked it for something like 100 mil, and the back wheel was off the ground when he put it under the side sill. And he said to me, "There's no way you can rally with suspension that's only got 100 mil travel." And he helped me with independent rose joints and rear suspension. When he was finished with the car, you could put a jack under the side stand and look at 500 mil, and the wheels were still on the ground. And it made massive difference to things like that. And yeah, for me, as I said, just didn't grow up in motorsport, never involved in it, and it was such a blessing to be involved or to be introduced to people like that. My first time that I went out with Spotty, I was 38 or 39 years old, so reasonably late to get involved in rallying. Probably good at that stage from a financial point of view because I could afford it, but a little bit more experience would have counted a lot.
Well, you couldn't have asked for a better start with those people assisting. Spotty Woodard is legendary in South Africa. You could assist me on this one again, but he did something like 100 rallies as a navigator at national level. And then he got into that little Castrol Golf of his, and he did another 100 odd as driver. So he's got an incredible record in South African motorsport.
Yeah, I think he was just an absolute legend, and it was so sad with his passing when I learned about that. But you know, the knowledge that Spotty had was just absolutely incredible, and on just about everything as far as rallying is concerned. And you know, he's one of the few people in the world that's had that opportunity to sit in those amazing quattros. And you know, you talk to him about that. It was just an experience that few people had the privilege of having. And look, I mean, my second rally with him. Yeah, I'm this big guy now. I know about rallying. So we went down to the Tour Natal. We actually, there was a bit on the South African rallying Facebook page about him, and I commented. But in the stage in Pietermaritzburg, I think it's Prince Alfred Park or something like that.
Alexander Park.
Yeah, we went around the thing on the first lap, and there was a specific instruction which I'll never forget. It said turn hard right or 90 right, watch for stumps on left. And we went around the first one, and we got to the second one, and I repeated the instruction, but Spotty got a bit carried away, and he knocked the left rear wheel off this Golf on one of the stumps. And it's nighttime. I just remember seeing the sparks flying out the back here, and Spotty just kept on driving as if nothing had happened. I was so confused about this because nothing had ever happened like this in my life to me. And I stopped counting. So we ended up doing an extra lap. Instead of 4, we did 5, or instead of 5, we did 6. But he just kept on driving. And at the end of service, we replaced the whole rear hub. But because of the extra lap that we did, we got time barred by something like 6 or 7 minutes when we got to the end of the lap.
Well, obviously he forgave you because you carried on again after that.
Yeah. Well, I must see where the both of us were involved in that one, because I had the call very clearly out to him well in advance, and he enjoyed himself. And then coming back to something else very, very interesting. You know, one of the things that he was famous for is on the famous Castrol Rally, which, as we all know, was a very grueling sort of 3.5-day event. We used to drive the Golf to the start, then rally all the way to Swaziland, and then drive the car back without anything else. And he did that year after year after year. And Spotty famous again for eating very, very little during an event. You couldn't get him to eat, you couldn't get him to drink. And you know, towards the end of the event, he would start waning. And I remember on one of those Castrols on the Saturday morning up in Swaziland in the pineapple fields there, coming around a corner, and I could just see his body is going slower and slower and slower. And eventually he knocked a bank on the left with a car, and he woke up, and suddenly off we went again. And he picked up the pace. He was actually falling asleep at the wheel. He just kept on going. He just wouldn't stop.
It's amazing to hear these. After so many years, you hear things that you just, if you didn't sit next to him, you wouldn't know this. So you had an amazing privilege to sit there and actually.
He was always also very peculiar in certain ways. I mean, I'd go through the road book beforehand and get to a certain instruction and say to him, you know, how would you call this? What would you say when? What? And he'd look at it, oh, it's a difficult one. I'm not really sure. When we get there, just remind me that's the one that we went through about. Yeah, as I said,
a brilliant mind. But did you ever get into a situation with Spotty where he was ever flustered? I can't imagine him ever being flustered on an event.
I'll tell you this one. One of the famous events that we had rather early in day one. Serge had problems, mechanical problems at whatever, and I think it was down in PE somewhere. And I remember we sat at the start of the stage because Swart had now fallen behind us. And we were just about ready to start when Vito came running up to the car and said, "Oh, we had problems. Can we start ahead of you?" The spotter just looked at him and he said, "No, he can stay behind me. Because I know my times. If he can catch me, then he can pass me." And then I went and so he couldn't catch us because what he knew he was behind us, so he was going for it.
Oh, I can only imagine Serge's face when Vito had
Well,
to
Serge was in the car. Look, I must say that my experience that I had with Serge was also, I don't think it's anybody that was ever flustered. Look, I didn't really personally get to do much with him, but whenever I heard him talking, or whenever I heard him talking to his service crew, he always seemed to be a very, very calm man. And that was also quite interesting. I think Vito was more worked up than anything else.
Your era in South African rallying, any particular event that you would consider the highlight?
I would probably, if I have to come back, I'd probably say my I think it was my second event with a little Honda, which was the Rally South Africa in Cape Town. That was the year when they moved it down there, and we ended up. Look, it was obviously a new experience for me, and driving a little 1600 car that had only one wheel because we didn't even have an LS in the car. And I remember on the last stage in town, tarmac stage, we did a fifth fastest time outright of the whole field, which was quite good. But the one that probably would stood out most for me was Tour Natal, around about, I think, 2000 in the little Honda, where we ended up 7th or 8th outright. And I was running car 5 at one stage because the people having issues. And it was the first time in my life I'd done a lot of work to the suspension on the Honda at that stage, which not a lot of people knew about. And I was always battling against the Works Toyotas, the Dean Saunderses and the Quibus Ruises and those guys. I just couldn't get to their pace. Was sort of a second half a kilometer off their pace. And after doing this work on the Honda for about 3 weeks, we got to Friday night, Park Fermé. I didn't check my times as normal. I had a navigator who hadn't rallied before. And next morning, when we checked the times, we were leading N2, and by quite a good margin, something like 30 seconds or whatever. And as we walked in and was waiting at the start control, Dean Saunders walked up and he said to me, "You're not going to lead for much longer because they made a mistake on my time cards." I said to him, "Well, Dean, I'm just here to enjoy myself." And we went off to Scottsboro and it started raining. And I remember when we got to the start of the stage, everybody was frantically putting on mud tires and things, and I didn't have any, but just continued with the tires that I had on the car. And the car was just performing like you couldn't believe it. It was the first time in my life where I'd been able to follow lines of the leading drivers, and you'd be on the right-hander and there'd be a washout on the line that they followed, and I just followed that, and the Honda just danced over those stages. And I remember sort of halfway through Saturday afternoon at one of the service points, Dean Saunders came up to me and said to me, "I've given up, mate. I just can't keep up with you." And that was the first time that we won class on N2 on the car. And I think it was probably also one of the last rallies that I did in the Honda, because then I was already busy with a Subaru.
I have to touch on that subject because at the time the Honda was becoming quite hot property in England as a rally car, but in South Africa it was an unknown quantity. You were the first one to go for the Honda, but I know people were watching that car very closely because they knew it had quite a bit of potential. what gave you what made the choice? Why did you choose the Honda to go into Group N2?
Obviously, when I was building that car just before that, you know, the hot thing in South Africa was the Group N, and because of money and whatever, N2 was the answer for me. So I was very good friends with Kobus Roos at that stage, and Kobus had the 1600 RSI. And I just did a bit of research on power to weight and things like that, and realized that the Honda at that stage had the best power to weight ratio. I knew about the success that they had in the UK, and you know, there was just an opportunity with the car, because that was an ex-track car, Kurt Elchin's car. But they discovered that the Civic or the hatchback shape on track didn't really work, so they went over to the sedan style car, and that car was just standing there. They had no engine or gearbox in it, but it had the cage. But as we all know, it had a track cage in it, and we know the track boys are a bit rough, so that had to be cut out in total and redone. And I built the car to full N2 spec. And it was just, you know, the way that little car revved and the way that it performed. And as I said, there was nothing fancy in it. It had dynamic shocks, which I brought in from the UK, but the rest of it stock standard. It still had roof lining in it, carpets, everything that we had to leave in the car. Standard gearbox, and not even an LS diff. It was just an incredibly well-balanced car. I liked the suspension setup, the way that it had a double wishbone system. I believe that was one of the best balanced cars ever. My first rally that I did with it was up in, I think, the Delmas Broncos Strait area. And at that stage, Fernando Rueda just bought the two, well, the Daewoo's. Paolo was still in his Ford, and you know, it was quite a competitive thing at that stage. All of the eight cars were to go at that stage. And I remember on Saturday morning, because we had a massive amount of rain coming around one of the corners in those mealie fields, and the first car I saw was Rueda stuck in the mud, and the next one was Paolo in the Ford, in a four-wheel drive Ford, also stuck in the mud. And they were all standing there, you know, sort of, I think they were about 6 standing there, but standing there, folded like this, and I come around the corner, and I just put that foot flat on the Honda, and it revs up to the 9.2 where it was limited, and I drive in between their cars, and I just remember the mud going up next to me in the wheel. And as I go by, Paolo just shakes his head, and I drive that little one-wheel drive car through all of these. Carry on. And that's because of the suspension that was so well balanced on those cars. Power to weight and distribution was just incredible.
Well, it made a lasting impression on you, because as far as I know, you're still in possession of that car. It actually traveled with you.
Yeah, that car I actually brought out, and unfortunately that car physically doesn't exist anymore, but I've got one similar to that. What happened with that is I gave it to my daughter, and she was supposed to fix it, and she started sanding and stripping it and just left it, and eventually it rusted, and it just wasn't worth it. So I got another body, transferred the cage, and I'm busy building a special little car there. I've always enjoyed doing things myself, so I'm putting a 2-liter K20 Honda motor in it with a 6-speed static sequential, paddle shift, manufactured suspension, everything chrome moly. I've manufactured every bit of suspension on the car myself, and I hope to put it on the ground at about 880 kgs. So it's going to be as light as anything, and it will be a rocket.
Are you going to rally with it?
Yeah. I'm doing all of the body panels out of carbon fiber and Kevlar, very similar to the S2000 style body panels. I do all of those things myself. I manufacture it, and that's why, from a weight saving point of view, I'm going to be able to get it out there, as I said, hopefully about 880 kgs. So it's going to be as light as anything, with massive power to weight.
And it's going to have a similar style arches as the Polo, because I saw some pictures where you I think you pulled some molds off the Polo, and I saw the note, so I was confused whether it's for the Polo or for the Honda.
No, that's for the Honda. So that's I've developed it from the Polo's concept and idea, and so I've got all of the molds all made up. I've just got to pull the panels itself now out of it. I've got a carbon fiber bonnet for it. The molds are all done. I've got to pull that out of it. I'm currently busy as we speak. Yesterday I pulled all my carbon fiber inserts for the dash out of it and things like that. The car's hopefully going to be very special. I've got a very, very nice set of Rigers all ready for it, sitting in the shed. Got that directly from the Riger in Holland, and very, very good. Latest spec. They've now even got a thing on the shocks, which I never knew. They call it RCV, rebound control valve. So it's a valve that's right on the top that senses when the wheel loses traction. It automatically compensates for it. So I've got that. So the car's going to be good.
They even have these kind of valves on the mountain bikes these days.
Okay.
I just
I've always said, the Dutch, if there's something they know a lot of things about hydraulics, just go and ask the little boy that pushed his finger into the hole when it started leaking. So the Dutch know about hydraulics, that's for sure.
Well, I think they just, considering your age now and trying to make it easier for you to drive this potent car when it's going again.
Yeah, well, Patrick, what shall we say? I mean, age, I joke and say, I'll probably be 80 and still pottering along in the rally car. Maybe at the back of the field, but I'll still be there. I enjoy it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
Look, obviously, maintenance and work, and especially on the Polo, because I do everything myself, it's massive, but I enjoy it. I truly enjoy it.
Now, sorry, Clint, carry on.
So, now, I must compliment Marius that he's putting a Honda in a Honda and not putting a Honda in a Ford Escort like some guys do. That's actually...
When I had my little Julia running, I was up against the Ford Escorts and things up in South Africa, and they all had either an Alpha diff or an Atlas diff or something, and I always just said, look, you go to my Alpha. It's Alpha from front to the back. And, that's what I believe in.
If I may ask, what happened to that Julia?
I sold it to a guy by the name of Keith Delport, and Keith actually still rallied that car up till about 3-4 years ago. I still saw some photos of it up in Gauteng or whatever it's called now. So I don't know what happened after that, because I think he bought the ex-John Upton Skyline, and I saw that he rallied with that afterwards. But that's my Julia. The GT Junior, unfortunately, I don't really know. I left it in South Africa for my son, and I think he had a bit of a bang with it and sold it to somebody. I don't know what happened to the ex-Vermont Julia, because GT Junior, because that was just a fantastic car as well.
Take us beyond the Honda now. Okay, we now know you've got the Honda in Australia. You are in Australia. You even got the accent to prove it now.
It's been here for so long, I'm an Aussie now, Patrick.
Well, I'm going to have to ask the question. Are you still a South African, or are you now an official Aussie?
Now, I've been an Australian citizen ever since 2005. We're very fortunate. We came out and we had permanent residency immediately in 2003, and in those years things have changed a lot on visa applications and regulations and things. But you had to fulfill your visa requirements and then be in Australia for a minimum of 2 years before you could apply for citizenship. But we were fortunate in as much as that, we bought the business after about a year, and having fulfilled our visa requirements, I then applied after about 18 months for citizenship, and we got our citizenship after 20 months in Australia. So been a fully fledged Australian ever since October 2005.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk politics, but do you at least still miss South Africa?
Patrick, it's a difficult question. I've never been back, and
Never?
I don't intend ever going back, because I think it's one of those things. Once you've made up your mind that you want to do something, you've got to set your mind to it and make a success. I've had friends, and one of them is also an ex-rallyist, and he's also famous for one thing, and that's for rolling a car quite dramatically, and that's Brian Loopstra, Jojo.
Yeah, remember him.
And Brian came out to Australia.
With the Volvo Beetle.
Yeah, he came out to Australia a year before me, but he's gone back and he's currently there. He says he's now decided that he wants to come to Australia because he's an Australian citizen. But with the whole COVID thing, he's stuck there now. But Brian never got his teeth into business and setting up here. I think he's always missed his friends over there, and for some reason he kept on going back. I've never been back. So I must say, very fortunate to live in a country like this. It's as you said, it's got rules and regulations, lots of it. As long as you fill your forms out and you do your applications and you get everything in line and you don't exceed the speed limit, and it's a fantastic country to live in. Everything works, everything is clean. I broke my wrist working on the Polo after I'd rolled it, and fell off a little ladder and broke my wrist. Drove myself into the hospital, local hospital. I mean, going through therapy, going through everything. 8 weeks later, fixed. Everything paid for. Not one single cent out of my pocket because it's all covered.
Unreal.
It's an incredible country to live in.
Well, that's another element we have to touch on. We see Australia on maps and stuff, and you think, little island. But that little island is everything but little. Where are you now? And yeah, you gave me quite a shock by telling me how long it would take you just to cross that part of Australia. So put that in perspective first, please.
Perspective. Okay. So I live in Queensland. 20 minutes outside of Brisbane. I live in a town called or a city called the Redlands, Cleveland. We live in a suburb called Thornlands, which is part of it. Now, Queensland is one of 5 states. It is the second biggest state in Australia, and South Africa will fit into Queensland 1.5 times. And if you take it a little bit further, virtually 6 of South Africa would fit into Australia. That is how big it is. It's absolutely massive. If you go from the East Coast, which is where we live, Brisbane, Sydney, although Sydney is, I talk Sydney, but Sydney is 1,400 kilometers from us. But the East Coast to the West Coast, where Perth is, flying time at 6 hours. And as I said, there's a 3-hour time difference. That's how big it is. As the crow flies, 7,000 kilometers from Brisbane is where Perth is. It's massive. That's also the reason why, I had all of these illusions of grandeur that I'm going to compete in the Australian Championship. When I brought the Polo out here, I did one event in Canberra, which is a full day's drive. It's 1,600 kilometers from where I live. But I worked out if I wanted to do 6 events in the Australian Championship, I'd have to drive in excess of 30,000 kilometers for the year, just towing the car to get it there and back. So it's massive.
So I would like to know, why did you buy a VW Polo in South Africa, ship it all the way to Australia when there is such a huge rally infrastructure in Australia at the maybe at the moment. I'm not sure when the time during when you brought it over, if that was there already, but I'm assuming it was there already.
Look, Clint, what you got to remember is in the S2000 era, there weren't a lot of FIA homologated cars out there, and I've always been a big believer in an FIA homologated car, because you can go and rally it anywhere in the world. And you know, I don't know if you guys are aware, but my Polo is probably, I stand to be corrected, but I think it is the only Polo that I know of that's got an FIA logbook and that's competed in a WRC event as an S2000 Polo. I think so. I'm not sure. I've never seen it anyplace else in the world. Yeah. I did the 2009 World Rally Championship. And anyway, having said that, I started looking around. At that stage, it was the Fiat, the Peugeot, it was the Toyota, the old style Auris, and then the Polo. Proton had just started developing. I know Neil Bates had the Corollas here, or whatever they called them, but his was never internationally homologated and still has never been. And they also had two little Ford Fiestas here, but those were not built to full S2000 standards, and that's why I wanted a car that had full FIA homologation. And when I did my research, that was just after Freddie Loixert won that event up in Belgium, and the Polo had quite a good name, and also obviously on the South African Championship, you know, it was an extremely successful car. And I just, I loved the Polo, I loved the sound, I loved the shape, and that's why I went for it. Created quite a stir when it landed here. But again, you know, having moved here, it's like there's Carl commenting.
Carl Biscuit.
Yeah, he came to the WRC, and I met him when we were competing there. As I said, it created quite a stir, but again, I was an outsider. You know, I've always considered myself to be an outsider. In South Africa, I was an outsider in the sport because I didn't grow up in it. And in Australia, I was an outsider because I was a foreigner that moved here and started rallying with a rather special car. So it's just been one of those things.
Which car? Hang on, Clint. Let him just state
which car?
Which Polo is there, because that makes it a very special motor car.
Which year is it?
Yeah, and who drove it in South Africa?
Okay, that's the Polo that Yanni drove on the last 6 events in 07 and won the South African Championship with.
Just by the way, that's nothing special. It's just a championship winning car.
I was very fortunate. I mean, we probably all know, or you guys all know, Michael Barnard. Now, I call him the Groot Crocodile. You know, he reminds me of Mr. P.W. Botha of years ago. Anyway, Mike is a difficult man to deal with. He's an easy man, but he's a difficult man because you never get the real or the straight answer out of him, and it was a tough negotiation. When I started, look, let me put it this way first. When I started being serious about the S2000, I approached Neil Bates about building one or supplying me with parts or something, and he just wasn't interested in dealing with me. So then I said, well, I'll go out someplace else and find a car. And then I got talking to Mike, and I also talked to Whammy at that stage, but Whammy also didn't really want to sell cars or anything. Mike had a car that was for sale, but it wasn't that same car. I think it was the car that eventually went privately to, who was the young guy in the Cape that rallied? John Williams.
John Williams.
So it wasn't at the same spec as this one that I got eventually. But at that stage, Mike and them had been building a number of cars for Europe for, I think, Rene Georges, who was running their program up in Europe. But that thing fell flat. And because of that, the whole deal, I think they built 3 or 4 cars that were supposed to go to Europe that never took place. I think those cars got moved into the top cars for South Africa, and that's why that Jannie Habeck car became available.
Okay.
I was very fortunate to get it because obviously the car's got the history. It's good. It's a fantastic car. I think it's an absolute giant killer.
Yeah. And in terms of the support of the car, in terms of the engine parts and that, because the S2000 is a very highly engineered, specialized car. Did VW, are they still supporting you in that, or are you doing your own kind of?
No, look, I still deal with them. I still, unfortunately, it went a bit south when the motor racing VW officially closed down. But there is really a number of them that I still deal with. Yeah. so I'm in fact waiting right now for some parts that I've ordered because, as you say, very highly engineered, these cars, and amazingly, a lot of those parts and things are standard that they use in them, and that's one of my big problems. The valves only last about 1,500, 2,000 Ks on the car, and then that's it. So I'm busy with a bit of development on that myself, but the bulk of it, I still talk to Prof regularly down at Motor Racing, and I deal with Neil Lewis as far as the ordering of the parts and things are concerned. Prof is an absolute superstar. I only started talking to him after the racing division closed down. But when Mike was still there, I used to deal with him, Philip Visser, and also Ian Yuckel was the engineer originally when I purchased the car.
Take us to Australia now. How does it fit into the Australian scene there?
Look, the car fits in quite well, except for the Aurus that the Mortons had brought out. It's still the only FIA homologated S2000 in Australia. The S2000 scene never really took off in Australia. It's a very unique sort of setup as far as rallying concerned. The turbo 4-wheel drives, Subarus, Mitsubishi Lancers, they still big. The Lancers are incredible in Australia. The power they hold and the things that they do is just crazy. I mean, the guys are talking 235 kilowatt on the wheels and anything between 800 and 1,000 Newton meter.
Sure.
Torque. So I'm up against those cars for some reason. They've decided that is where I compete. That's the class that I fall in. So I'm sitting with 130 kilowatt and 240 Newton meters against them. But the Polo is still an incredible car. There's nothing that sounds like it. Mine specifically, the sound coming out of that car is just absolutely beautiful. There's just nothing that sounds like it. Yeah, that's what I said. That's what I'm famous for, putting the Honda into the wall.
Marius, compare the Australian conditions in which you rally compared to South Africa. I would imagine from what we've seen, it looks pretty much on par, except I suppose you have to dodge a kangaroo every now and again.
Yeah, it's funny enough, kangaroos aren't that frequent on rallying. I've come across, I think, one in all the years that I've been rallying here. Goannas quite often in the road in the area that we live in. And look, the other thing that's interesting, certain parts, especially in Queensland, in our forests here. If I'm in there, I may just as well be up in Sabi, Nelspruit area rallying there. You wouldn't really know that there's a difference. We have a lot of forest style rallies in Queensland. I obviously only compete in the Queensland Championship at this stage because of logistics. And then we would once in a while have I'd call it a rally which would probably be similar to the mountain trial, the roads. So it's fast flowing roads. We call it Shire roads. So Shire is like town council. It's not forest. It's roads that would be travelled by normal public in the times when it's not closed for rallying. So it's fast flowing open roads. But the conditions, in addition to that, as I say, I may just be up in Sabi, in some of the forests in here. It's really some rough areas, but in general, very, very good.
And what is it that Australian Motor Association is doing different in terms of keeping rallying alive, and what kind of development programs are in place?
Look, Clint, it's difficult. I think it's the similar sort of thing that is happening all over the world. It's extremely difficult to keep rallying alive and feeding. We went through a period of decline where costs were just determining that competitor numbers were just going down all the time. Funnily enough, I think once again, COVID's probably been good for rallying in as much as, people spent a lot more time at home and therefore remember about the rally sitting in the shed and did a bit of work, because our numbers after COVID has been extremely good as far as entry levels are concerned. We didn't have much happening last year. In the Queensland Championship, we were supposed to have 2 events, of which only one happened. And it just happened to be the event that I sponsor. I sponsor one of the Queensland rounds of the championship. The other one got cancelled, not because of COVID, but because of a fire danger. The other thing that's quite interesting here is that if it rains, a rally gets cancelled very, very quickly and very easily, because if there's any damage to the roads, then the organising club is responsible for the cost of fixing those roads, because all of our forests are privately owned. So before a club can get to the risk of having a huge repair bill for roads, they rather cancel or postpone the events. The Australian development, it's very difficult. There's a few things that are happening. The Bateses have built some new cars, but they've got Toyota behind them, and they're about the only people that have got sort of backing from some sort of manufacturer. But the cars that are running as top cars in the Australian Championship is basically cars that would only be allowed to run in Australia, New Zealand, and maybe Asia. They don't comply to FIA standards. They always allow a little bit more than what the FIA would allow.
It's quite interesting, because I was looking at the cars that's being developed in Australia earlier, and if you look at what Hayden Paddon has been doing versus the Bates with the Yaris, you guys are at the forefront of developing some super nice cars. And then obviously there's AP4 also, which is, we come back to the same point. So when I look at Australia, it's really the home of development in terms of rallying.
Yeah, look, the AP4. I mean, if you talk to an Australian, he'll say to you, we should have the same rules as New Zealand, because that is basically where a massive amount of these really super, call it super type rally cars are developed. in Australia, the rules are still reasonably strict. They've allowed the AP4 now to be let's call it the top car. I must say this year is the first year that I can see that we've actually got a number of R5 cars as well in the Australian Championship. So it's going to be an interesting championship. Unfortunately, the first rally, the Australian Championship for the year, has been cancelled or postponed. It will only happen next weekend because I don't know if you guys saw on TV, but we had this massive rain event where we've had in 5 days rain that would normally fall in a year in this place. So some places have had in 5 days in excess of 600, 700 millimeters of rain. So the first event just got postponed by 2 weeks.
Yeah. So where does the AP4 fit in? Is it R4, R5? Because I actually saw that
it's higher than that. So R4, there's no talk of R4. I've obviously followed the R4 development with interest because of the involvement of Rally Technique in that. But there's no talk of anybody in R4 or similar classes. The R5s are all cars that have been brought in from abroad. And then the AP4 is really just one step above that. It's got a few more freedoms and a few more things. The car that the Boulders are running, both of the cars that they ran the last season have been sold on to other rallyists, and they've now got these two brand new AP4s, which I think is the first development of that Yaris in this AP4 format. So it's going to be quite interesting to see how those cars perform. But knowing the Boulders and knowing the research and the money that gets put into those cars, I would guess to say they're going to be right on it right from day one. They're going to be very, very tough to beat.
Marius, obviously you come from the era in South Africa where we had people like Hannes Grobler developing strangenesses into super rally cars, the era of the Skyline, some unique cars, not FIA homologated, but certainly unique in their own respect. And I know in New Zealand you've got a few interesting cars running there as well of the same nature. Do they encourage that type of thing there, or is it strictly to the rule book type of thing?
Look, it's not really encouraged. There's always some element of people that are wanting the rules to be relaxed, because in the end it's all about money. It's all about what you can put into a car. But I also believe that rallying is at such a state that we can't really turn anybody away. So if somebody can develop a car and it is safe, for me, the main determining factor is whether the safety rules have been adhered to. It doesn't necessarily mean that car's got to be allowed to win an event if it's really totally out of its class against what it's competing. But it should be allowed to compete in the event, even if there's a special class for things like this. I mean, I'm probably in a similar position with the Honda that I'm building, because the Honda is not going to conform to any super class. I'm doing it because I can and because I want to and because I enjoy it. And they'll probably class it as rally car something like that, and we just can't afford to turn anybody away that comes with a car as long as it's safe.
But that's the thing, because if you think rallying Australia and you think retro cars, right? There's a dozen Triple A's running there by Brandon Reeves. That is phenomenal, and it's such a crowd puller, and everybody talks about it. So definitely I agree with you. And so I was actually thinking early on when you were mentioning the Honda, will you be falling in the same class as him, because his cars are quick pedal shift?
Those cars are basically classified as classics, and the classic rules are really. You're probably also well aware there's an S1 Quattro replica being run here, and the car is absolutely beautiful. Mel, who's built the car, has put in an absolute brilliant effort into it. and he keeps on developing and doing this and doing that, and it is such a crowd puller. You talk about Brendan Reeves. There's a youngster up here called, well, he wouldn't like me calling him a youngster anymore, Ryan Smart, that runs a Datsun. They call them 1600s because of the shape.
Yeah.
But all of these things have got 2.4 and 2.6 litre focus in them.
20, yeah.
And Ryan Smart, I competed against him in the Queensland Championship. And let me tell you, he runs this old rear-wheel drive car. I cannot keep up with him in the Polo.
Yeah.
I just can't. He beats me. He beats the turbo four-wheel drives. The development that they put into the car. Look, take nothing away from both Brendan and Ryan Smart. They are brilliant drivers. Like I said to one of our competitors that said to me, he knows the stage like the back of his hand when he put up those times. I said, well, he's still got to drive the car. He's got to put it in the right spot. And it's a rear-wheel drive car. It only pulls with 2 wheels. So he's an absolute brilliant driver. But I must say, those cars are really, really quick.
Yeah. Now, I'm truly fascinated about the old retro cars with some of the latest technology. Like with Brandon's Triple S, Patrick is running a Hoolinger sequential box.
Can I just come in there, please, Clint? Yeah. It's Hollinger, mate.
Hollinger. Yeah, I was trying with the pronunciation.
South African country, they're very strong.
Yeah. And with Subaru diff, and they developed the shocks themselves, and at this top class work that they've done there.
Sounds like a baby blue.
Well, I was chatting to Frank Kelly earlier this evening, and so I was saying to him that we're interviewing Marius. So he asked me if Bruce Garland was going to come on.
Yeah, look, Bruce is the one that runs the K20 Honda and an Escort.
Yeah,
isn't that right?
Yeah. Yes.
He's the Australian sort of, let's call him Kenil de Villiers, because Bruce is the next Dakar man.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's got the little Mark 1 Escort with a Honda K20 motor in it, and quite a potent little car. Look, in Australia, you're either at the top with a turbo 4-wheel drive or with these latest development in AP4s, and then there's a massive following for rear-wheel drive cars. It's just huge. I remember when I went spectating on my first event, I was actually disappointed because to my mind, I didn't see any rally cars. They were sort of at that stage, the Evo 5s and 6s. There would have been around about 4 or 5 of them at the front of the field, and the rest of them were all Datsuns and old cars. And I thought, where are the modern front-wheel drive cars like we used to have a lot of in South Africa at that stage? Because that sort of aspect doesn't really exist in Australia. At one stage, the whole championship was based around that, and there were a few people who pushed for it, but that fell flat. And again, you only had a few of the really top cars, some Citroens and Renaults, and nobody else followed suit. So nobody built their own cars as far as front-wheel drives are concerned.
If you're so young that you don't remember driving rear-wheel drives, you've never rallied.
Oh, Patrick, let's take time on that one, okay? So I've done it all. I've started with rear-wheel drive and with great success. I mean, I ended up with my little 73 Julia. I think third outright on Gauteng Championship, won class with it. So that was a fantastic little car to drive. Then I went to Honda.
Niels won the South African Championship with it.
Single wheel, great car, and Subaru, nice to drive, but man, oh man, nothing gives you the feeling that a Polo S2000 does. The way it talks to you, the way it responds, the fact, a lot of people have got a misconception. They say, yeah, an S2000, it's full of electronics, it's full of this, it's full of that. They don't understand there's no electronics. Nothing. It's a driver's car. It's an absolute driver's car. It is fantastic to drive.
My personal take on S2000 is it put rally cars in a different league as far as what it's capable of doing on rough stuff. Stopping on gravel like you cannot believe, accelerating on gravel like you cannot believe. And there is no such thing as a rough road for an S2000. You just keep it flat out. And honestly, when you get out of the car and you go walk some of those areas, you get a fright because you think if it was a car of 20 years ago, you would have left the wheels there when you go through these ruts. But in an S2000, you simply go flat out. The modern suspension is mind-boggling.
Yeah, that's what I always say is the big development in cars have come in suspension. And my example that I use for that, if you look at Ogier, who put up that quickest time ever on Uninpoja, that stage
in Finland.
Finland. If you look at it, it's a little 1600 turbo car, and he beat the massive quattros that had that massive amount of power and everything. And the developments come in the suspension. It's just incredible. It's incredible what the suspension has come to do.
So I was fortunate enough to go for a ride with Alan Martin in, I think it's your sister car, which was the second car, right? And I can tell you, people can say what they want to, and that thing scream, mate. It scream. It was on a tar stage that we made late at night in Walfish Bay. But I can tell you, that thing was so much fun. Because when you can sit in the travel, you can actually see how it dips and how it pulls up, and it's something phenomenal.
What I say is the way the car talks to you. On dirt, it's just incredible. It responds, the way it brakes. Like Patrick said, you cannot believe that a car can pull up so quickly. It can get there very quickly, and then it can pull up so quickly. It just talks to you. The fact that it's everything on its mechanical, your gearboxes, your diffs, it's all about prep and setup. But once you've got that, it's just the most incredible car to drive. I've never had fun driving a car as much as those.
Until you finish the Honda.
Well, the Honda will be fun, but it's not going to be an S2000, Patrick. That's the reason initially behind my thinking the Honda is I wanted to build something that will be a lot cheaper to run for smaller events like what you call rally sprints or test and tunes and that sort of thing. Small events, we've got a few of them, and I would still keep the Polo just for the Queensland Championship because it's an outright competitive car, whereas the Honda is probably going to be very hard push. May not be. We'll see once we get it on the road. I just need to tell you something interesting. I've thought about it now. Coming back to Spotty. Now, when Spotty was not rallying himself, he was always spectating. I remember him when I competed in the Northern Regions Championship with a Honda. He would always be at the end of a stage there in his little Castrol hat and whatever, and he'd comment. And the very first time I ever put up a quicker stage on a regional event with a Honda, at the end of the stage, he was standing there and he had his stopwatch, and I looked, and he came up to me. He says, "You've just become part officially of the WatchSpot system." Because, as you know, the seeding system is what him and Tim Watson developed. Yeah. And he obviously, because I've now become the benchmark for that stage, in his eyes, I'm part of the WatchSpot system.
A walking calculator. That's how I see Spotty.
Yeah.
I don't think his brain never stopped working.
That's for
he
sure.
was always onto something. Marius, we've taken you out of bed very early this morning.
Well, it's get up
I
time
must
for
say,
me now.
it's a unique privilege for us to say that we started off in the evening, but we greeted you the following day, or something to that. Sounds ridiculous. We would love to chat to you for much longer, and I think we could, but it would be unfair. You've got a day to face yourself. But somewhere in the future, we would love to repeat this exercise and possibly chat to you about some more South Africans in your vicinity. I do believe that you have the privilege to speak Afrikaans quite regularly in your area still.
Yeah. We've got a number of people living in the area, and a lot of Afrikaans speaking. Karen and myself still speak Afrikaans at home. Our kids, we still speak Afrikaans to them. So, and it's just, it's crazy if we in a conversation where other people are involved, if we're talking to them, we would speak English. But if Karen and myself talk to each other, and it's just for ourselves, we'll speak Afrikaans because it just feels uncomfortable to speak English to her. So yeah, that's a part of us that will never go. I don't know if you heard a couple of minutes ago when you were talking, some funny noise in the background, but that's the kookaburras waking up. They normally start making their beautiful laughing sound at this time of morning. They're an absolute stunning bird out this way.
Well, next time we would love to see you with one in your office there, because it is a truly magnificent animal or bird. I didn't think I should have put some of Karen's artwork up here, because when we moved here, Karen's an artist, and she originally kept on painting the South African themes and the South African stuff, and ever since the last few years, she's concentrating a lot more on the Australian. So wallabies and kookaburras and absolute brilliant stuff. I should have had some of her artwork up. Yeah, that's one of the seascapes at the back of me there that she's done. But anyway. But wildlife there is absolutely amazing, and quite scary in some respects.
Yeah, look, you see these things about spiders and snakes. I don't think it's much different from Africa, but we still, I don't know about you guys, but we don't like spiders. And if you say that to an Aussie, they say, "Hey, but you come from Africa." I say, "Well, a spider, I don't like them." The animal life is just totally different, because there's just nothing like you're used to in Africa. But I think Africa is probably fairly unique as far as that is concerned. You just don't find that sort of animal all over. But the rest of the stuff, we're fortunate. We live on a reasonably sized piece of property here, and we've got a few wallabies around, and yeah, it's absolutely beautiful.
You haven't bumped into anything particularly scary as such?
No,
everybody believes that we've got lions walking around in the street here. So
yeah, that sort of thing.
What do they consider to be dangerous out there?
Yeah, I've seen a few snakes and a few things, but nothing really particularly scary. There's a big joke. You guys should actually go and Google drop bear. And see how scary the koalas can get, because apparently what they do is when you're standing under the tree and the koala's up above, it drops on you and it tears you apart. But that's just urban legend, so go and have a look at those things.
Well, there goes my wife's theory of them being cuddly and beautiful.
They are sweet most of the time, Patrick. That's the interesting thing, because they only eat a certain eucalyptus tree leaf, and the thing sort of puts them into sedation. So they sort of very drowsy. No, they're beautiful. It's just an Aussie thing, because they like to warn German backpacking tourists to stay away from foreigners. The Aussie humor is quite unique. Sometimes I'll say something and I think it's hilarious, and they'll just look at me as, "What's wrong with you?" And they come out with something very unique.
Yeah, I think we've lost.
we've probably
He's got-
waffled on for long enough, and I think
Yeah,
everybody is tired of hearing me and seeing my face and hearing about Australia. So
No, it's been an absolute privilege. So, Marius, I think we lost Patrick. I think he has some technical issues. But on behalf of the team and all the viewers, thank you for waking up very early. And we'll definitely ask you to come on the show again. And maybe some closing out words from yourself.
yeah, Clint, thanks so much. It was an absolute privilege, and it's quite interesting. The comments coming through, a lot of these guys I remember from years ago, and obviously there's something about me that they still remember. So it's been an absolute privilege, and I hope I'll be remembered for a bit more than rolling a Subaru and running into a wall.
Well, we're giving you the opportunity to be.
That friends of mine took of that incident, and it actually shows Young falling off the wall sideways, but the camera's still on his shoulder.
We're going to give you the opportunity to become famous again, because we're going to repeat this exercise sometime, and you've got a few rallies coming up in which you can put in stupendous results and brag about them next time we speak to you.
Let's hope we can, Patrick. I mean, one of the biggest ones for me was beginning of last year when we went up to Whitsundays, and it was the first rally run in that area, and we had our normal competitive youngsters and big turbo four-wheel drives. And the old fella with his blind abilities, being able to read the road, managed to win the event outright against all the youngsters, and that was a good feeling. It proved that being able to read a road blind is a skill that not everybody has been able to develop. That was really fantastic. But as I say, thank you so much. It was really great, and I hope everybody enjoyed it. And to all of my friends and people that remember me, all of the best. You guys stay safe in South Africa. Look after yourselves. Keep the COVID at bay, and we'll try to do the rest.
Thank you
very much, Marius. It was a real honor to speak to you again. And well, Clint, that's the first of our Australian guests, but there's a few more being lined up.
Yes, we got a jam-packed schedule. I think especially for the first part of the year. But before we forget, we must please ask our audience to subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's picking up huge momentum at the moment. Like we said, we've got a few guests, special guests coming on. We've alluded already, and Patrick let the cat out of the bag. So we might as well put it out there.
We're not allowed to drop any cola, so we're going to let the cat out of the
cat out of the bag. So please diarize the 21st of April. We will have Frank Kelly and Baby Blue on the show, and he promised to be in shed with Baby Blue and give us a technical talk through the car. So it's going to be something special for the month of April. But that's one of the shows, at least, to put it lightly.
And thank you to Byron in the background. Show your face, Byron. We'd like to say thanks to you as well.
Yeah, thanks.
Pleasure, gentlemen. As always.
Pulling the strings in the background. It seems like we got you worried tonight because your hair's all gone all over.
I was sleeping, by the way. I was just taking a nap quickly. Patrick is so disgusted. He actually just left right now.
Yeah, I seem to have a bit of a sensitive camera here or something.
Yeah, his camera is acting up. It's past his bedtime.
Yeah. Before I disappear again, thanks, guys. It was lovely.
Okay.
Chat to you next week.
Cheers. Bye.